So did anybody in Dan Markel's life have contact with any of the phone numbers from that tower dump?
We did find this 786 number that was present in the tower dump, was also present in Harvey Adelson's call detail records.
And were you able to identify who that 786 number that left a voicemail to Harvey Adelson on July 1st, who that number belonged to?
Yes, that number was associated with Mr. Garcia.
Can you walk us through where Dan Markel went the morning that he was murdered based on his call detail records?
Yes, again, we know that Mr. Markel was at his residence in the morning, that he did take the children to Creative Preschool, and then ultimately went to Premier Health and Fitness to work out prior to returning home.
Did TPD believe that whoever shot Dan Markel was at some of those same locations that morning, or at least one of the same locations?
We certainly believe that it was possible or likely that he was being surveilled or followed as he traveled around that morning. Yes.
Okay, and at this, y'all had seen the surveillance images of the Prius at Premier Gym.
That's correct.
Okay. How were y'all able to identify or to try to identify who was in that Prius using the cell phone records?
Well, one of the techniques that we have is what is commonly known as a tower dump. And what we're able to do when we have multiple locations and we have approximate times, we're able to serve a legal demand to the carriers and ask for any events that were processed through the cell sites that would service those three locations. And then what we're looking for there is assuming that they actually had events, made or received phone calls, text messages, or data sessions. Then the only numbers that we would see that were common to those three different locations and those time frames would be handsets that were traveling with Mr. Markel. We would look at a radius around that location and determine what cell sites might service that location. We see we have two cell sites here with T-Mobile that my belief would service the Premier Health and Fitness. So those are the cell sites that we ask the carrier to provide to us.
So you contacted all the phone companies who had cell sites in those locations where Dan Markel was, Trescott Drive, the preschool, the Premier Gym. You looked at all the records for all the numbers located in those cell sites in those time frames.
Yes.
What did you do once you received the tower dump records from those phone companies?
As I mentioned, we do have analytical software. And one of the things that it does is looks for those common callers. So we can put these records in and ask it for any phone number that was consistent with all of those locations. And that's what we did in this case. Fortunately, we did not find a number that was in all of those locations. Okay,
so no number had been to Trescott Drive, Premier, the preschool, and going back to Trescott Drive after?
Correct, not in the time frame that we asked.
Since we couldn't find a number with common events for all four of those locations, what did you do next?
Well, what we got back was, again, a list of all the phone numbers that had events or were present in those cell sites during those times. So in essence, that's just a list of unique phone numbers. In addition, we had a significant number of call detail records from all the subjects involved in the investigation. It could be the Adelsons, the victim, a number of people that we already had records for. So again, those are also a list of phone numbers calling one another. So we were actually compared all the numbers that were here in Tallahassee, that were near those towers around those times, to see if they had any connection to any of the other persons that we already had records for. Did anyone's phone number that was here have communication with someone that was involved in our investigation?
So did anybody in Dan Markel's life have contact with any of the phone numbers from that tower dump?
We did find this 786 number that was present in the tower dump, was also present in Harvey Adelson's call detail records.
Who is this and what is that next to him?
So this is Harvey Adelson, and those are, again, an image of the actual call detail records that we obtained from AT&T.
Now, when did that contact with the number that was in the tower dump have contact with Harvey Adelson's cell phone?
So that was on July 1st of 2014. We can see that that was at 5:20 p.m. This is another situation I mentioned earlier where it appears that we have three different events here, but it is just one. It's one incoming phone call that was routed to voicemail.
Okay. So about, I guess, 17 days before the murder, a Miami number that was communicating with a cell site here in Tallahassee on the day of the murder that Dan Markel was at. And which cell site was it?
That was the cell site around Premier Health and Fitness.
Okay. About 17 days before that, that number had a contact in the call detail records with Harvey Adelson's cell phone.
That's correct.
What are you able to tell about this contact between the Miami number and Harvey Adelson's cell phone?
Again, with AT&T, some of the things that we see is both a seizure time and a duration. So how long did the phone ring? And then how long was the phone actually connected? Did the call connect? And then we may see an indication of routing or where that phone call was sent. So in these records, what we see is that the phone did ring for several seconds and was then routed to voicemail. It indicates that the phone was actually connected for 37 seconds once that ringing stopped. So that's the potential for a 37-second voicemail.
Okay, so you can tell from the records that this call, it was routed to voicemail.
That's correct.
And then there is a several second duration after it reaches voicemail where either someone could have been breathing on the voicemail or leaving a message.
Again, I have no idea what was said or not said or left or not left, but there was a 37-second duration that this was connected to voicemail.
Okay. And were you able to identify who that 786 number that left a voicemail to Harvey Adelson on July 1st, who that number belonged to?
Yes, that number was associated with Mr. Garcia.
Now, did a witness in this case explain why Garcia left a voicemail on Harvey Adelson's cell phone? And
what another witness said.
If we can approach, he's trying to explain another reason why he knew this as a voicemail and he's an expert.
That's hearsay. You can't, commenting on another witness's testimony is going to be hearsay. So that's sustained.
Yes, sir. Can you tell me what the person's name was that provided an explanation for that voicemail?
That was Miss Yendra Mascara.
Yendra Mascara?
I believe, yes.
Good afternoon. Will you tell us your name and spell it for our court reporter, please?
Sure. It's Yendra, Yindra, Velasquez, Velazquez, Mascaro, Mascaro.
Thank you. Did Sigfredo Garcia ever confront Charlie Adelson?
I only know of one instance, and it wasn't, he didn't talk to him really.
Mm-hmm. And how do you know about this? Let me ask you first of all.
Katie told me about it.
Can you tell me what she said?
She stated that they were leaving her apartment when she lived in North Bay Village, and that he blocked the car that they were in because they were going out. They were going jet skiing, if I'm not mistaken, and that he blocked the car, for them not to be able to leave.
Okay. Garcia blocked Charlie Adelson and Catherine Magbanua for leaving.
That's correct.
Okay. And you said that Garcia, from what she told you, Garcia and Charlie never talked, but he was creating some type of disturbance. Garcia was causing a scene. Okay. What did she tell you about what happened? How did it end?
They just ended up driving off. Okay. After he eventually moved the car and they just drove off.
Okay. So there's never any direct communication, but it's screaming, yelling, causing a scene, and then they leave.
Yes.
Now after that, I guess bout of jealousy, disturbing a scene or causing a scene by Garcia, did Catherine Magbanua tell you about something Garcia did that embarrassed her?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me about that.
She told me that he retrieved, or what he thought was, Charlie's phone number from her cell phone. And it ended up being that it wasn't Charlie's phone number. It was actually his father's phone number. And that he left a very nasty voicemail on the phone.
He leaves a very nasty voicemail for Charlie's dad.
Yes, but he thought it was Charlie that he was leaving the voicemail for, but it ended up being Harvey.
Okay. And how did she feel that her ex has called her boyfriend's dad and left a nasty voicemail?
She was really embarrassed.
Yeah. That voicemail was the only contact that you were able to find in any of these records from that number, Sigfredo Garcia, to anyone in the Adelson family, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Were you able to obtain historical call detail records for Sigfredo Garcia's phone?
Some, yes.
Okay, can you tell me about that?
Certainly. So this account or this phone number was being serviced by Metro PCS, which at the time was being taken over by T-Mobile or purchased by T-Mobile. We did send a number of legal demands, and we were able to get basically 2 sets of records, one primarily from each carrier, that provided us some call detail records and locations and those kind of things for periods around the homicide.
And did you run a frequency report on Sigfredo Garcia's 786 phone records?
We did, yes.
Okay, and what did you see?
And what we saw that the top number was this 786-564-1312.
And who did that number belong to?
That number was associated with Miss Catherine Magbanua.
You've never taken him to rent a car?
No, I've never taken him.
Okay. Now, when you were at this time, did Sigfredo own a car, or was he just switching cars all the time?
He was switching cars. I don't know if he had his own car at that time.
So it could be that you just don't know whose cars he was driving.
Yeah, he would just get his friends' cars, or I don't know.
So I want to talk to you about this day, because this day actually stands out in your memory, okay? It's the July 1st
Yes, ma'am.
confrontation, okay? Now, explain to the jury in your own words what happened that day. So let's start with, do you get a call from Charlie? Like, is he inviting you to go out?
I don't remember like who called who first or
Okay.
whatever, but I know he wanted to go out on the jet ski.
And were those his jet skis?
Oh, a jet ski, yeah.
Oh, just one?
One, yes.
Okay. Had you guys ever gone jet skiing before?
I believe so.
All right. And what happened with Sigfredo that day? Did he come and pick up your kids?
Yes, he did.
All right. Was it his turn to watch the kids?
Yes, ma'am.
And he picks them up. How old are Ethan and Kaylee around this time? Kaylee would be 2, and so Ethan would be 5?
No, probably 7.
7. Okay. So he takes the kids. Do you
5 years
remember what
apart.
car he was driving at that time?
I believe he had like a blue Volvo.
Okay. And is this the car that he was in when the confrontation happened?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So do you see him take the kids and leave?
Yes.
Where do you think he went, or you just didn't ask?
Well, I mean, I found out later that he was at that like a pizza place, like down the block from like where I stayed.
But when he left, you had no idea where he was
No,
going?
ma'am.
So you come downstairs. Does Charles come to pick you up?
Yes, ma'am.
What's he driving?
The Lexus,
And what's tacked onto the back of the Lexus?
the jet ski.
Is this outside your North Bay Village apartment?
Yes, ma'am.
Is this in the parking lot?
Is it like what, when you want to go pick me up?
Yeah.
Yeah, he picked me up in the parking lot.
So he picks you up in the parking lot.
Mhm.
Are you guys able to exit the parking lot?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. When is it that you see, or you know what? You tell the jury. What happens next?
As we were pulling out of like the parking lot, we were gonna go down the way, like one of the roads, and Sigfredo cut us off and just jumped out of the car and started screaming in the middle of the street.
So you're on a roadway.
Mhm.
Okay. He blocks in. Do you immediately recognize that that's Sigfredo's car?
It was fast, but he jumped out of the car and like stood in the middle of the street, so I knew it was him.
Now describe for the jury, because he's not a small guy, Sigfredo, right?
No, ma'am.
Okay. He's a lot taller than you are.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And at that time, was he, working out or?
Yeah, he was fit.
He what? Stood up in front of the car and what did he do?
He just started screaming in the middle of the street, but I didn't know what
Was
he
he-
was saying.
Could you hear what he was saying?
No, ma'am.
Were the windows up?
Yes.
All right. And do you know if he was screaming in English, Spanish?
I don't know what he was saying.
Now, when you see him, what was your reaction?
I was shocked.
What was Charlie's reaction?
Oh, he was petrified.
Now, when you say he was petrified, what do you mean?
He looks at me and then he's like just trying to find a way to get out of this, like the one, because the street is very narrow.
Mm-hmm.
So he was trying to figure out how to basically do like a turn with the jet ski so we can go the other way.
Okay, so basically turn around because now Sigfredo is blocked off the other way.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Did Charles ever get out the car?
No, ma'am.
Did Charles ever say anything to you in the car?
Say something to me?
Yeah, about Sigfredo.
No.
He was just
Not
trying to
that I
get.
can yeah, he was trying to get, his focus was to get out of the way.
Now, did he get out the way?
Yes, ma'am.
What happens when you guys drive off?
Sigfredo like kind of pulls, so he jumps back in the car and he pulls up next to us and he's just screaming and I'm just looking at him like why are you, he was acting crazy.
Did you see him get on the phone?
Get on the phone while
Yeah.
while he was driving?
At any point at that day, did you see that he had gotten on the phone?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay. Now, did you find out that at some point after you left that he had made a phone call to the Adelsons?
Yes, ma'am.
How did you find out that that phone call had been made?
I don't quite remember.
Do you know did Charles tell you or did Sigfredo tell you?
I think this was already on the way when I came back, like when I was going to pick up the kids from Sigfredo.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like trying to, we were fighting about something, I guess the whole situation, but I went out to the jet skis already. Like we already went out and this was on the way back.
Oh, so you'd already
I was
gone
already
out.
going to pick up the kids from Sigfredo.
Where was Sigfredo with the kids? Do you know? Remember?
I know. I think I pulled up in front of Shrimp's house.
And that's where he was with the kids?
The kids might have been inside the house because it was, or he left them with his mom. But I was talking to him like we were outside and he was on the phone.
Okay, so that is when he, as far as you know, is making the phone call.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
could you
ma'am.
hear what he was saying?
No, ma'am.
Okay, did you know who he was speaking to?
No, ma'am.
Was he talking?
Yeah, he was talking and then he walked away. Like he was talking on the phone and then walked away and I'm like chasing him in the middle of the street.
All right. Were you able to get his phone from him or anything like
No,
that?
ma'am.
And why is it that you end up calling Harvey Adelson after that debacle?
Because he left a message apparently on his phone.
And what was your purpose of calling the Adelsons? Were you embarrassed?
Yes.
What did Charlie ever say? Did he ever talk to you about that afterwards? About, what happened with Sigfredo doing that?
I don't remember.
Okay. So you don't remember him specifically discussing that with you or saying anything about it?
I think about leaving a message on the phone on his dad's phone.
Yeah.
But besides that, not that I can recall.
Did he seem upset that this is what had happened? Like, oh, your psycho ex-boyfriend is like, I can't be with you because he's so crazy?
I mean, I guess.
No, did Charlie ever kind of say that to you? Like that, because of that incident, that is what would have caused your later breakup?
No, ma'am.
And was Catherine Magbanua's phone number found in any other records that you had as part of this case?
Again, as I mentioned, a frequency report is a common thing for us to do with all records. We did have a frequency report for Mr. Adelson, Mr. Charlie Adelson's records, and what we saw was that her number appeared in his records as well. And for the period of these particular records, it was the second most frequently contacted number.
So you find Garcia's records in this tower dump communicating near Premier Gym. You compare his number against all the Adelsons and find only one contact ever from him to Harvey Adelson, and it was just a voicemail. So then you look at Garcia's frequency report to see if any of his top contacts have any contact with any Adelson, if there's any link to him and the Adelsons. And this is what you found?
That's correct.
Did you look at anything else in Garcia's frequency report?
Again, knowing the frequency reports, may help us identify people that are important to any particular person. Knowing that we had two persons who had came to Tallahassee, we did actually compare the numbers in his frequency report back to that tower dump data that we got. And what we found is that there was an AT&T phone number that was in a cell site here in Tallahassee that was also in his frequency report.
And who did that number belong to?
That number belonged to Luis Rivera.
But the reason you hadn't noticed it before is that there was never a contact with anyone in the Adelson family or anyone that you could find connected to the Adelsons with him.
But that's correct.
Okay. And when Luis Rivera was interviewed by law enforcement, he admitted that he and Garcia were, in fact, in that Prius at Premier Gym that day following Dan Markel.
That's my understanding, yes.